For 4 years, the bruises were carefully hidden beneath oversized sweaters, and her silent tears were swallowed in the dead of night. She believed she was entirely unlovable, trapped with a monster. But everything shattered the night Chicago's most ruthless crime boss decided she belonged to him. The digital clock on the microwave glared a neon green, 11:42 p.m. Harper Quinn stood perfectly still in the cramped kitchen of their Logan Square apartment, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was 28 years old, carrying well over 250 pounds on a 5'4" frame, a physical reality that her boyfriend, Derek Caulfield, made sure she never, ever forgot. For 4 long years, Harper had existed in a psychological and physical prison. Derek was a mid-level collections manager at a sleazy auto loan firm, a man whose ambition vastly outpaced his actual talent. To the outside world, to neighbors like old Mrs. Gable in apartment 4B, or the barista at the corner coffee shop, Derek was a charismatic, hard-working guy carrying the burden of a lazy, overweight girlfriend. Behind closed doors, Derek was a monster. He had meticulously engineered her isolation. First, he convinced her that her friends were secretly mocking her weight behind her back. Then, he took control of the finances, claiming she spent too much on junk when she tried to buy groceries. He weaponized her body against her, breaking her self-esteem into such microscopic pieces that Harper genuinely believed no one else would ever look twice at her. "You're fat, Harper," he would whisper, his fingers digging into the soft flesh of her waist until it bruised. "You're fat, you're disgusting, and you should be on your hands and knees, thanking God I even tolerate looking at you." Tonight, the apartment smelled of burnt garlic and stale fear. Harper had accidentally overcooked the pasta. It was a minor mistake, a distraction born of exhaustion after working a 12-hour remote data entry shift. But in Derek's world, there were no minor mistakes. The heavy front door swung open, hitting the drywall with a familiar thud. Derek stepped in, smelling of cheap whiskey, cheap cologne, and the sharp scent of winter rain. "Harper," he slurred, shucking off his damp coat and throwing it onto the floor. "Where is my dinner?" Harper wiped her trembling, sweaty hands on her apron. It's on the stove, Derek. I'll plate it right now." He stalked into the kitchen, his eyes bloodshot and narrowed. He didn't look at the plate she was hurriedly preparing. He looked at her. He looked at the soft curve of her stomach, the fullness of her arms, and his upper lip curled in profound disgust. "Did you eat half of it already? Is that why you're sweating? Sweating like a pig just from standing in a kitchen?" "No, I haven't eaten," Harper whispered, her eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. Derek snatched the plate from her hands. He looked at the slightly browned pasta, then back at her. With a sudden, explosive motion, he hurled the ceramic plate against the wall. It shattered, sending sharp shards and hot noodles raining down onto the floor. "You useless fat cow!" Derek roared, his hand shooting out. He grabbed a fistful of her hair, yanking her head back so sharply her neck popped. Harper cried out, a pathetic, broken sound that only seemed to fuel his rage. He backhanded her across the face. The heavy silver ring he wore on his middle finger caught her cheekbone, slicing the skin. Blood instantly welled up, warm and thick, tracking down her round cheek. "Clean it up," Derek spat, letting go of her hair and shoving her hard against the counter. Harper's heavy body slammed into the edge of the granite, knocking the wind completely out of her lungs. She crumpled to the floor, gasping for air, the sharp shards of ceramic biting into her knees. As Derek turned his back to grab a beer from the fridge, something inside Harper finally snapped. It wasn't bravery, it was pure, unadulterated survival instinct, the primal realization that if she stayed on this kitchen floor, she was going to die here. Without thinking, she scrambled to her feet. She didn't grab her purse. She didn't grab her keys. She didn't even grab her winter coat. Wearing only a thin, oversized grey cardigan and a pair of worn-out leggings, Harper bolted for the front door. "Hey, where do you think you're all going?" Derek yelled, dropping the beer bottle. Harper slammed the apartment door shut behind her and ran. She flew down the 3 flights of stairs, her heavy footfalls echoing in the silent building. She burst out into the freezing November night. The rain had turned to sleet, stinging her face like tiny needles, washing the blood from her cheek down her neck. She ran blindly. Her lungs burned, her thighs chafed, and her chest heaved with agonizing effort. But she didn't stop. She navigated the dark, slippery pavements of Chicago, moving toward the glowing neon lights of the downtown district. She didn't know where she was going, only that it had to be public. It had to be somewhere well lit. Behind her, she heard the screech of tires, Derek's rusted sedan. He was looking for her. Panic seized her throat. Harper ducked into a narrow, dimly lit alleyway, behind a row of upscale restaurants and exclusive clubs on Rush Street. The alley was dead silent, save for the hum of massive industrial HVAC units. She crouched behind a heavy steel dumpster, pressing her back against the freezing brick wall, trying desperately to muffle her ragged, gasping breaths. She wrapped her thick arms around her shivering body, burying her bleeding face in her knees. "Please," she prayed to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. "Please just let him drive past." But the crunch of gravel at the mouth of the alley made her heart stop. "You think you can run from me?" Derek's voice echoed off the brick walls, dripping with venom. "You think you can waddle your fat ass away from me and hide, Harper?" Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. Harper squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the blows she knew were coming. Derek rounded the dumpster. His face was twisted in a snarl of pure hatred. He reached down, grabbing the collar of her cardigan and hauling her upward with brutal force. "You embarrass me," Derek hissed, pinning her against the brick wall. His forearm pressed against her throat, cutting off her air supply. Harper clawed helplessly at his arm, her vision beginning to swim with dark spots. "I'm going to beat you until you can't even crawl." "Let her go." The voice did not come from Derek, and it did not come from Harper. It was a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to absorb the cold air around it. The command wasn't shouted. It was spoken with the quiet, terrifying authority of a man who was utterly unaccustomed to being ignored. Derek froze, his arm still pressed against Harper's throat. He turned his head. Standing 10 feet away, stepping out from the heavy steel back door of the obsidian lounge, were 2 men. The man slightly behind was built like a tank, wearing a dark suit and holding an umbrella. But it was the man in front who commanded the alleyway. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and impeccably dressed in a custom-tailored charcoal overcoat that screamed wealth. His dark hair was slicked back, and his sharp, angular face was cast in the shadows of the alley's solitary security light. This was Victor Rossi. To the IRS, he was a real estate developer. To the streets of Chicago, he was the undisputed head of the Rossi crime family, a syndicate that controlled everything from the docks to the underground casinos. Victor hated loud noises. He despised domestic disturbances near his establishments. But most of all, Victor Rossi possessed a deeply ingrained, violent intolerance for cowards. "I said," Victor repeated, taking a slow step forward, the expensive leather of his shoes silent on the wet pavement. "Let her go." Derek sneered, though Harper could feel the sudden tremor in the arm pinning her. "Mind your own business, buddy. This is my girlfriend. We're just having a disagreement. She needs to learn her place." Victor's dark eyes shifted from Derek to Harper. He took in the sight of her. He saw her heavy, trembling frame. He saw the soaked, cheap cardigan clinging to her thick arms. He saw the terrified, round face, the split cheek, and the blood mixing with the freezing sleet. Derek had always told Harper that her fatness made her repulsive, invisible to other men, unless it was for a joke. But Victor Rossi did not look at her with disgust. He looked at her with a terrifying, piercing intensity. "Her place," Victor echoed softly. He snapped his fingers. The tank-like man behind him moved with shocking speed. Before Derek could even blink, the bodyguard had crossed the distance, gripped Derek by the back of the neck, and slammed him face first into the brick wall. Derek screamed as his nose shattered with a sickening crunch. He dropped to the ground, writhing and clutching his face. Harper collapsed against the wall, gasping for air, sliding down until she was sitting on the wet concrete. She was shaking violently, unable to process the sudden, brutal shift in reality. Victor walked over, completely ignoring Derek, who was currently whimpering and bleeding onto the asphalt. Victor stopped directly in front of Harper. He slowly crouched down, his expensive overcoat brushing against the filthy ground, completely unbothered by the grime. Up close, Harper could see the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow and smell the expensive scent of bergamot and cedarwood. She cowered, expecting this new, dangerous man to hurt her too. Instead, Victor reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a pristine, monogrammed black silk handkerchief. He held it out to her. Harper stared at it, her chest heaving. She slowly reached out a trembling, chubby hand and took it, pressing it against her bleeding cheek. "What is your name?" Victor asked. His voice was no longer a harsh command. It was a low, steady rumble. "Harper," she stammered, her teeth chattering uncontrollably from the cold and the shock. "Harper Quinn." Victor's eyes swept over her again. "Harper, does that piece of garbage belong to you?" He gestured vaguely toward Derek, who was now being hauled to his feet by the bodyguard. He's my boyfriend," Harper whispered, fresh tears spilling over her lashes. "Please don't kill him. I just want to go home." "No, wait, I can't go home." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had nowhere to go. She had no money, no phone, no family left in the city. Derek, spitting blood, managed to garble out, "You're dead! You hear me? You have no idea who I am." Victor stood up slowly. He turned to Derek, and the temperature in the alley seemed to plummet another 10 degrees. "I know exactly what you are," Victor said coldly. "You are a weak man who beats a woman to feel large. And now you are trespassing on my property." Victor looked at his bodyguard.